Diane, today I will be focusing on an area of special ed. I don't have any hidden gifts or party tricks to share, unfortunately, but I want to introduce you to a topic. After we do a little warm-up activity, I want to see if you can guess what do you think the objectives of today's little lesson is, and I've given you a clue. It is an area of special ed, something that we don't really deal with in our course. So I'm going to say a sentence. I want you to listen very carefully because I'm going to ask someone randomly to repeat it. Goofy grinning goblins gobbled gigantic grapes while juggling. And I'm only going to say it once. Okay. Just totally randomly. Paula.
Goofy grinning goblins juggled gigantic grapes. Oh, I can't remember.
That was a great attempt. It was very close. And it's just a few words there that you got wrong. And I'm going to give one more. Listening carefully, a pair of Martian spaceships sailed in and landed in the park. Okay, a boy's turn. Greg.
Oh, who's Martian?
Oh my God. A pair of smash sheep.
That's a great attempt. It was a pair of Martian spaceships sailed in and landed in the park. Now, did you find that difficult?
Yes.
Imagine how hard it would be for a child that has a hearing loss. And that's today's little lesson. It's to raise your awareness of hearing loss and also how teachers' perceptions affect a student that has hearing loss. So, to set the scene a little bit, this is one of my books, one of my favourite books, because it captures my imagination straight away because it's called The Race. But it's actually a great book to share with children to raise awareness about children with disabilities. And so I'll read it to you. I'm going to read it a little bit quicker than I would if I had a class, obviously because we're adults and because we're limited by time. So, in class races, Greg was always last. He had long legs, strong legs. He could run like an emu. He could jump like a kangaroo. At cricket, he could field a ball faster than anyone, but he could never win a race. Okay? But before I turn the page, just thought I'd tell you, there will be activities based off this book. So listening is the key. And the activities will be based around looking for ways that we can identify children with possibly have a hearing loss, and also teachers' perceptions. So just keep those two things in mind. In school, he was the first to finish a page of maths, and his drawings were the best in the class. But in mental arithmetic and spelling, he was always near the bottom. For 13, he added 30, and for 7, he subtracted 11. For cheer, he wrote chair, and for carrot, he wrote parrot. His teachers complained that he was careless. They told him that he didn't pay attention. They said he had daydreamed. But Greg wasn't careless. He did pay attention. He did not daydream. He listened, but sometimes all that he heard was a murmur, a fur of words, a blur of words. But he always smiled no matter what people said. He smiled, but he did not quite join in. Greg was like a piece of jigsaw that did not quite fit, no matter which way it was turned. He was a puzzle because he did not quite belong. There was an emptiness around him, a gap between him and the others. He seemed to be in a world of his own. Greg didn't want to be alone. He wanted to fit that place, to fill that space, to win that race. He watched every face and smiled at people, looking for a way to be with them. He watched their lips, he watched their eyes, he watched their hands. When his classmates picked up their pencils, he picked up his. When they turned the pages of their books, he turned his. When they laughed, he laughed. But when it was his time to read, his voice was like a shining lump of quartz, smooth and hard, then suddenly rough and broken so that the words sounded different. And when the teacher corrected him, he would say the words again in his own way. When the others put up their hands to answer a question, he usually put up his too, but sometimes he gave the wrong answer because he only heard a stir of words, a whir of words. Then the teacher would say, "Daydreaming again? Pay attention, Greg." In the playground, no one could catch him in a game of chase. He always kept his eye on the ball and he never missed it, but he couldn't win a race. He would line up with the others, balancing lightly on his fingers and toes. Sometimes he watched the starter, sometimes his classmates. One day, a new teacher came. She watched Greg as he watched others. In his own way, Greg paid more attention to what went on around him than anyone in the class. But after she saw his spelling and mental arithmetic, she knew he was lost. She was puzzled. She looked at him and saw what no one else had seen before. She knew he wanted to belong. She didn't say, "Pay more attention, Greg." She smiled to show she understood. She watched him as he worked by himself. She saw his correct maths and his exciting picture of a cricket match, and she was pleased, but more puzzled. She wanted to help Greg fit into his place amongst the others. She watched his quick eyes and his copying hands. She heard the rough edge of his voice and the broken sound of his reading. Then she knew she had found the clue. She took the class outside and lined them up to run a race. Greg wanted to show her how well he could run. He wanted so much to win. The grass was prickling his toes and his heart was thumping his ribs as he poised, waiting for the start. Out of the corner of his eye, he watched the boy beside him. Suddenly, everyone was ahead of him, running towards the teacher. Greg was last to reach her. He turned his face away. He wanted so much to be first this time, but he was last again, always last. He pulled 3 balls from his pockets and began to toss them high, catching them one after the other. I found this ironic that the boy's name's Greg and he can juggle as well. Left hand, right hand, 1, 2, 3. He never let one fall. It was a trick that no one else could do. He heard the teacher clap her hands. He looked at her and she was smiling at him, talking to all the class. They were to run another race, but this time with a different start. Instead of saying go, she would drop her hand. So, Greg smiled at her as she showed them. As they went back to the starting line, Greg was so excited that he was jumping like a kangaroo. He had eyes like an eagle's. He could see that signal even if the teachers were a dot on the horizon. If the teacher were a dot on the horizon. He had long legs, strong legs too. He could run like an emu. He was going to win this race. He knew. Steadily he watched, and as the teacher's hand began to fall, he was up and away, off down the track. With nobody ahead of him, it seemed a different race. So quick, so easy, so much fun. He crossed the line first. The teacher smiled at him and he watched her lips form the words, "Well done." Greg smiled back. She had found the clue. She knew a way for him to win the race. She had smoothed away the rough edge so that he could fit. He knew that she would help him find what he had lost before. The other words he somehow did not hear. Greg knew that he would not be alone anymore. Quite an emotional book. So, as you can see, that book, it deals with a child that has